Alright, so I've removed the knobs from the front of the amp, which are the knobs that are for the control pots that are mounted on this first board. And I'm getting ready to take this one off and index where all these cables go. I also removed the nut around the input jack, which is a 15 millimeter. And the other thing that's concerning me, and I'm going to have to take a look at this, when I look at these pots, nothing has a washer. Everything's just connected with the nuts, and in some instances, they're tightened down because they're pinching on one side, but I mean, you got like some light showing through on this stuff, so I'm not sure if these should have been washered on there or should have a washer underneath. There's not a whole lot of thread to grab onto, so if you have a washer, I'm assuming that you might not have enough thread. So maybe that's just the way that this board was constructed, but that's a little bit suspect to me in terms of what might have happened with this amp before. The only indicator I have of what's going on with this amp so far is the fact that it blew a high tension fuse, and that's actually in these bags here. So this the fuses are on the back on each side of the power cable input. So when you take stuff apart, do it in chunks and use these bags, little like half sandwich bags or snack bag size. That way I can put all of the pieces from the front into one bag. I'll put all the nuts from the back into one bag, any screws, like the 4 screws that mounted the chassis to the enclosure. I've got those along with the rear panel screen that protected the tubes. So I've got all that stuff in a bag. So make sure that you label your bags. But for now, let's just go ahead and go through and figure out where these connectors are going. So this is starting on the right, connector 12. We're going to trace that all the way back to the main board. That's going to be, Jesus, connector 13. These should just kind of pull out, so you should be able to just grab them and pull them right out. So there's the first one. Going right down, the next one that we're going to get to is connector 11, which we're going to trace all the way over here, and that corresponds to connector 9. And again, I'm pulling these off of this board that I'm getting ready to take out, but I'm going to leave them connected to the bottom board. The next one coming over is this big ribbon cable here, which is connector 10. Connector 10 runs across to the other board. I'm trying to keep the light out of the way. To connector 3. Yeah, they've done a really good job of labeling all this shit in a way that makes complete sense, Connector 9 is going to run down to, I'm trying to make sure they get all of these actual numbers, connector 7. Connector 8 beside it is going to run all the way over to the reverb to connector 2. Boy, we're getting close, let me tell you. Connector 7 goes down to the regular board to connector 11. Connector 6. That's this puppy here. This goes down to, let's trace it down to connector 5. And I just want to double check that one because it kind of crosses over this other one. So we've got connector 6 here, and I'm still holding on to it. And we go down, and we're down to connector, come on, focus, you bugger. Connector 5. Okay. Connector 5 up here, we'll also trace down. That goes over here to connector 4. Jesus Christ, this is cracking me up. Connector 4, this ribbon cable, splits out to all the same, which is connector 5. All right. Connector 3 up here corresponds down here to connector 6. connector, where am I? Connector 2 up here runs down to connector 3. Nearly there. Connector 1 runs down to connector 2 on the main board. And the only thing that's left is my green that's coming out, and it actually tucks under the board, so I'm gonna just pull this cable up to verify where it's going. The green here that I'm holding on to actually connects to that back terminal that's wiggling. So not the top, but the back terminal. So we'll pull that. That puppy's in there. And now we should have a completely disconnected board. So on these switches here for things like the deep control, the tone shift control, lead 1, lead 2, clean crunch, so this is the channel. This is a crunch and gauge on the clean channel. This is basically an EQ shift for tone and resonance or deep control. All of that stuff is just sort of free floating here. It's not connected at all to the board or to the chassis. It's just connected to these switches. But you know, like over time, like pushing on this stuff, you have to wonder, like, how are these solder connections? You can't tell any of that shit from looking at it because it's all underneath. So I'm going to have to take, you know, and I've checked the controls and they seem to be working okay, but I'm going to have to take this entire board out so that I can look at it, verify that it's good to go, and that all of those solder connections are good. So that'll be a future video. For now, all I'm doing is pulling the boards out, but this is the first board. We've completely indexed the cables, and this is JCM 2-61-00.